All right, welcome back, folks. We're obviously not paused for a week. I was able to find some notes that I had already begun. I went through them just now. It's been a little while since I recorded the video that's going to post today, but this is really just a wrap-up session for colonial United States to United States as a country. We all know the general story of the American Revolution. You had a very small force versus a very large force, and ultimately the very small force won, gaining their independence as a nation. But there were several things that basically showed this wasn't just a cut and dry home field advantage thing. Beginning in the summer of 1776, this is right after the signing of the Declaration of Independence, sending it to George III, of course, where he says, no, you're not independent. You're going to bow. You're going to bend the knee. So in the summer of 1776, 300,000 British troops arrive in New York City. Unfortunately, as they often happen, under the command of General William Howe, George Washington was outnumbered. The Continental Army was pushed out of New York and ultimately out of New Jersey and took refuge across the Delaware River in Pennsylvania. It was really kind of just a opening salvo. Now, yes, the Continental Army would have been disheartened that they were facing such a large force against them. This was certainly to be a part of General Howe's beginning strategy. Overwhelm your adversary to where they are disheartened from the beginning. Imagine if you were playing a football team on a Friday night and you're a very small school. You show up and you might have 3 standby players that can fill in a few spots. And you look across the field and you see a football team with 3 full teams, an A, a B, and a C team, and even then, multiple other people to fill in. Their uniforms are much more professional looking. They've brought equipment with them. They have a larger band, better cheer squad, and everything. You're going to be disheartened by being outnumbered and outclassed. I've watched games like that. I've listened to them on the radio, and it does not always go the way that everyone thinks it will, where the larger, more practiced, more professional team is going to win. It's not always about who has the more people or who has the better equipment. It's about heart. It's about desire. The British were there because they were being paid to be there. They were being told, you will go do this. The colonial army was there because it was their land. They had settled it. They had colonized it. They had built their lives there for over 100 years. They were fighting for the very lifestyle that they had built. The British were fighting for pay. And someone fighting for their life, their home, their lifestyle, is going to fight harder than someone fighting for pay. It's just that simple. It took a couple of months, but then Christmas Eve, or Christmas night, 1776, is the famous Washington crossing the Delaware. Now, I know this is cheesy. I saw it at a video game exchange store, and I couldn't turn it down. I collect Funko Pop, like a lot of people. History buff that I am, I had to have that one. But this is a moment where morale is greatly affected on both sides by Washington's move. Washington knew that he needed a victory. He needed something for his men to look at and say, we did this. We can do this. And he knew he was facing bloodthirsty mercenaries in the Hessian forces. So, on Christmas 1776, Washington crossed the Delaware. The next morning, as the Hessians were sleeping, he ordered the attack. Won a decisive victory It's not the most honorable thing, but it works. And there is no honor in war. This isn't like when you and your buddies were little and you could trade punches until someone got tired of it. You can't fight a war by sacrificing people. You fight a war by making the other side do it. General Patton very famously said, no man ever won a war by dying for his country. He won a war by making the other poor idiot die for his. And that is very, very true. And George Washington knew that. Sorry for all the cuts, but I am fighting allergies. Moving forward, though, into January of 1977, this is really where the British are starting to realize they're not facing an army that fights like they're used to. The British are very used to the standard, both going to line up, both going to shoot, whoever has people left at the end wins. I mentioned it in the previous video with the scene in the movie The Patriot with Mel Gibson, where the man playing General Cornwallis tells him it's not honorable to target the officers. Gibson doesn't care. He's not fighting for an honorable win. He's fighting to win. So in early January of 1977, General Cornwallis is advancing. Washington's troops set fires to make it look like they are ahead of the general's troops. But instead they're following him. And it is a decisive victory because it's Cornwallis's group himself. They were ambushed and they were defeated. And this really is being the second time. You had Christmas of 76 and now you have early January of 77 where Cornwallis is basically forced to admit, I'm facing an adversary that does not fight in any way that I'm used to. And he's got to realize he has to change tactics, but he doesn't know how to. This is a British general, someone who would have served decades in the Royal Army. He is so steeped in his ways, there's not a chance he's going to be able to change how he prosecutes a war. Throughout 1777, we start to see things really start to affect both sides. Okay, starting with the Battle of Saratoga, where it was decided that one general would go up the Hudson and the others would follow along land to Saratoga, New York. But you have a split where you have one general or one commander who goes south to Philadelphia. Ultimately, the Continental Congress had to flee lest they be taken and hanged as traitors. So you start to see the British trying to fight the way the Americans were, but it's not working. They're not used to small unit tactics. Talk to a member of the armed forces today, Army or Marines especially. Ask them about small unit tactics. The British didn't think like this. The British were very much, we're going to line up row after row after row of men. They're each going to take turns firing on the other side, and whoever has men standing is the winner. And the officers and gentlemen will be far from the fight, watching through their spyglass. And then when it's all over, they'll descend, and one side will accept the other side's surrender. Doesn't work that way anymore. And you can tell, starting right around the Battle of Saratoga, where you have them working and deciding, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do that. Yes, they did have the traitor Benedict Arnold, who did help them. And they were able to gain a victory here and there because of turning people from the colonial side to the British side of the issue. But it wasn't enough. They were facing an adversary that lived small unit tactics. They had been fighting against people using small unit tactics on them for decades. It didn't matter that they were fighting the local indigenous people instead of the British. It's still small unit tactics. Lighting of decoy fires, then follow as they go up on it. Ambush in the night while they're sleeping. Things like that just baffled the British, and they could not adapt to it anywhere near fast enough to turn the tide. 1778, we have the French join us. 1779, Spanish join us. Neither country friendly to the British. So they join with the colonial army. This brings in not only reinforcements, but training. It's very famous. You have Gerard Depardieu, I believe, in The Patriot, working with the colonial army to train them, in some cases, to fight as the British fight. This is not only to have a way to face those units, but it's also psychological. After all this time of facing ghosts and guerrilla warfare, now the colonists are fighting the way we fight. So it gets in their head. And it also ties up those units. 1781, we have the Battle of Yorktown. This is really where the heart is taken out of the British. General Cornwallis suffers a defeat, ultimately surrenders at Yorktown. Now, of course, it's going to take, as any war like this does, a bit of time after the surrender. Because unlike modern day, where we capture Soleimani, or we capture Hussein, the world knows about it within minutes. No, this would take time, because you have to dispatch riders to tell all of the British units that General Cornwallis has surrendered. You can see this because it was 19 October 1781 that General Cornwallis surrendered, but it wasn't until 3 September of 1783 that we had the Treaty of Paris signed. The Treaty of Paris declared the U.S. a free nation. Our borders were extended west to the Mississippi River, north to the border of Canada, all the way south to Spanish Florida. So it more than doubled the land that the colonists had available to them to colonize, farm, and live. And it really does show that simple philosophy that I brought up in the video today as well. Why did a small, untrained force win against the largest empire army on the planet? How is it that a bunch of farmers and merchants beat an army? And it's very simple. Home field advantage. Home field advantage in this case is a very real thing. Yes, it is a psychological thing in sports where when, I don't know, the Aggies travel to Alabama to face the Crimson Tide, you're going to have way more Tide fans than Aggie fans. The Aggies use this with the maroon out, where everyone's wearing a maroon shirt with the A&M logo, and they all link up, and they start swaying back and forth. The Aggie players know, do not look at the crowd when this happens. The other players don't. They look up, and it induces vertigo so quickly that they all look down real quick, but it gets in their heads. In this case, home field advantage meant more than that, because, one, they weren't wearing uniforms like the British. So you take a shot, and you run through the woods taking shot after shot after shot. When the British forces, whoever survives, finally gets into town, the person who's taking the shot, he's working an anvil. They have no idea who took that shot, and that's because of home field advantage, because that gives knowledge of the terrain. Someone in Yorktown or Saratoga, New York, or anywhere would have known how long it would take them to get from their home or shop or church to a wooded area that a few people could take pot shots from, taking out a few enemies or more, and still have time to get back to town and be working on a pair of shoes or making horseshoes or whatever it was. Motivation also plays a huge role. Motivation here is, we've been told, you will bend the knee, you will bow, you will accept that we rule you. There's very few people on the planet who, when told to do that, will do that. We're seeing it now with people actually lying about it, saying that, obeying the law is being subjugated. It's not. Don't attack a cop. Don't murder. Don't kill. Don't throw Molotov cocktails into a business or into the forest. That's not racist at all. It's not evil at all. And it's not subjugative at all. It's just the law of the land. But in the case of 1776 to 1783, during those 7 years, the British were very much reinforcing that you're not an independent nation. You will bow to the king. And the colonists said no. And their motivation was, we're all going to die. Everyone who fought in the war would be killed as a traitor. That's pretty good motivation. You had civilian support, yes. The civilians, of course, they're just there all the time. But they're just as motivated to be free as the Continental Army would be. But the Continental Army is going to be getting the food before the British Army. The civilians are going to know how to hide things, how to deliver this food or other supplies to the colonial army over the British Army. They're going to be able to provide refuge, medical support, far more that the British are going to have to find a way to provide for themselves. And yes, the British would march up to a home and just say, we're staying here. Get out. You, find a doctor to treat my men. And if people said no, they died. Knowing that if you don't help someone, you're going to be shot and killed is pretty good motivation to just buckle down. But there were many who would say no. But they would help the other side. That comes down to the leadership. Washington and Jefferson, Adams, Franklin, all of them were phenomenal leaders. They were charismatic. They knew how to rally people to a cause. They knew how to gain allies. We gained France and Spain as allies. Without them, we would not have been able to win that war. Not only did they train some of our colonial forces to fight the traditional way, but they would also have had men coming with them. They would have been able to bring supplies, from weapons to food to medical, and they would have been able to also aid in the guerrilla tactics. All of these things are necessary. We would not have been able to win if even one of them had been lacking. But the cards fell for us. The British really pushed their, you're going to do what we say or we're going to make you, hard enough to make people say, no. And that's what started it all. And then September of 1783, officially the United States became a free country. Not as flashy as July 4th, but still a very important day. In fact, in 3 years, it'll be 240 years of the United States as an independent nation. I know we celebrated that in 2016 because of the 4th of July, but that was when we declared it. We still had 7 years of fighting, bleeding, and dying to make it real. That's it for the revolution. That's it for colonial and the lead up to America becoming America. We are now an independent nation. There is still a lot of this book left. There's still a lot of American history left. It's not all sunshine and rainbows and peaches and cream. And it's still not that today. It's a long road. 237 years to get us from having just fought a war to free ourselves from a tyrant to where we are today. And that's going to be the focus moving forward. Let me know what you think. If there's a topic you'd like to look into in more detail than you think I might, let me know. Put that in the comments. Give me an email. The email will be in the description. And if you want a copy of the Constitution, let me know. Again, I'm not going to ask you for a dime to send you that Constitution. Just send me the email at the email address in the description below. When you're commenting, though, remember to be civil. We are logical, thinking, civil adults. We can discuss, dissent, and debate without acting like toddlers. Please do so. Please remember to like and share the video to affect the algorithm and to widen the channel. I'm doing the giveaway at 500, 1,000, and 1,500 subscribers, but I have to get there to do them. You'll want to be subscribed to be part of it and turn on notifications so that videos that launch off schedule, you'll know when they do. This class time is the only time I have a schedule. Everything else posts when I'm done converting it. So you'll want notifications to know when all that happens. Until next time, everybody have a wonderful day.